Hello, my prince. The good king has sent you to listen to the old man gab again, eh? He grows soft in his old age. There was a time he would have spurned my wisdom, child. See now how he has come to value it. Well, come and sit. Come. Stoke the fire while you do. The cold has seeped into these old bones. Leave it to King Conan to decide it is time to learn in the dead of the night. That's better. Thank you, my prince. Tell me, what has he sent you to learn of today? What has captured his mind so that he must send you to have your ear bent by an old man at this hour? Hyperborea. He grows nostalgic in his age. Perhaps it is the freezing cold which reminds him, or perhaps he has trouble unburdening his mind of affairs of state. No matter, my prince. We should start, as in all things, at the beginning. The good king has sent you to learn of Hyperborea, but to learn of that fabled land, you need to go far back into the mists of time, to a period before any of the nations of man you know had been born. A great cataclysm had rocked the earth, and the fabled land of Lemuria had sunk beneath the waves. Survivors wandered west, where they fragmented into groups. Some of them settled in the south of Hyboria, and these peoples founded the Aquilonian Empire. We will discuss that fellow nation another night, perhaps. Tonight we discuss the people who settled in the north, specifically one tribe, the people of Bori. The north was filled with wandering human tribes back then, many thousands of years ago. The ancestors of the king's own people were among them. One of these tribes was led by a great figure known as Bori, and his tribe were known as the Hybori, the sons of Bori. They were a mighty and warlike people, and they came to dominate the fate of the continent. But at the time, they were little more than scattered bands, bound to a frozen wasteland in the north by the power of Acheron in the south. They warred against one another, against terrible frozen ape monsters that came down from the furthest reaches of the frozen north, and against the ancestors of Hyrcanian raiders that harried from the east. The tribe of Bori wandered that way, to the east, and in the frozen land of Hyperborea they found a place that was at least a little more hospitable and less gloomy than chilly Asgard or shadowy Samaria. They overthrew a people there and claimed their name, Hyperborean. They stacked stones in a pile to help them drive away Hyrcanian raiders, and it worked so well that the technique spread. The Hyperboreans, even today, are adept at constructing fortifications, and their land is filled with walled cities. These fastnesses in the snow gave them an edge in battle. They became powerful, defeating Asgardian, Cimmerian, and Hyrcanian raiders alike before the walls of their castles. Eventually, they grew so adept at war that their might could no longer be contained by the north, and they spilled south in great waves, tossing down the power of Acheron and pulling their fell towers into rubble. The tribe of Bori spread across the entire continent, and eventually split into the peoples you know today. Yes, my prince, we come to it at last. That is why the continent is called Hyborea. It is the home of the Hybori. But make no mistake, the Hyperboreans of today are a far cry from what they once were. They remain tall, taller even than the Nordheimer, if you can believe it. Many of them have blonde hair and bleached gray eyes. Their language is coarse, and they have little regard for the mannerisms of polite society. Brave, fierce to a fault, Hyperboreans are rarely mistaken when outside their frozen home. The Hyperboreans you know today raid constantly across the border of their country, both to the east and west, for captives. They drag many Cimmerians, Nordheimer, and Hyrcanians away into slavery. Hyperborea is perhaps the greatest slaving nation in Hyborea. Your own father has borne their chains, my prince, long ago in his youth. He escaped their bonds, of course, but he has never forgotten the taste of the lash. You see why he outlaws the practice in Aquilonia. And perhaps now you see why those Hyborian dogs kidnapped you. They sought revenge. Revenge against the king. Indeed, slavery is ubiquitous in the land of Hyperborea like nowhere else in the world. Every household, no matter how humble, is almost sure to have a slave or two. The treatment of these slaves tends to be rather poor, though it is not unheard of for one to become valued by their masters and raised to a position of well-loved pet. Make no mistake, my prince, they are never more than pets. The practice of slavery is a vile, horrid institution that binds thousands in Hyperborea to an existence of servitude. It is also the main source of wealth for the city-states of the region. Indeed, in recent years it has brought the Hyperborean kings closer to the land of Stygia. That dark, southern land has found itself with an increased need for flesh under the reign of Tothamon, and the Hyperboreans are one of the few nations still willing to launch war parties whose sole purpose is the harvesting of slaves. This alone would be enough to make the Hyperboreans our enemies. You know yourself, my prince, how the dark power of Tothamon has threatened our fair nation. Any endeavor which aids in that snake's plans stands anathema to the good of Aquilonia. I suppose one would be forced to admit that there is a rough beauty to the land of Hyperborea. It is a place dominated by high frozen peaks, sweeping, treacherous glaciers, and pristine tundra, as wild and untamed as the barbarians which call the nation home. It is a place where the barest fragments of civilization cling only within the rough stone walls of Hyperborean cities. There are few horses kept there, and the people have been disunited for as long as I can remember. They are ruled by dozens of petty kings and lords, each usually in command of no more than a city or two, and each one claiming superiority over the others that they cannot truly enforce. They fight amongst one another as often as they raid across the border. King Tomar, ruler of Epona, currently claims to be High King of Hyperborea, but the truth is his rule does not extend past the walls of his city. He has fierce competition from the King of Sinashka, one of the most prosperous centers for slave trade in all of Hyborea, and from the ruler of Kurgan, the largest training and trading center for slave pit fighters in the entire land. Indeed, the arenas in Kurgan are so popular that many free men and women enter willingly to prove their might as gladiators. The gods of the Hyperboreans are too many and varied to list tonight, my prince. Not at this dark hour. Each city tends to have their own beliefs, and the local rulers tend to serve also as high priest. You can be sure that the Hyperbore will eschew the light Mitra. They have a particular disdain for the god of law, and instead they cleave to dark spirits and unspeakable eldritch beings. The Hyperboreans have been known to engage in ritualistic sacrifice to these entities, and many of the slaves taken into the frozen north are taken for these purposes. You have first-hand knowledge of this fact, my prince. You were taken once by foul sorcerers, and rescued only by the fierce diligence of your father. He would never abandon you, my prince, and be thankful that he would not. Else who knows what would have happened to your soul. Now, there are some things you must be made aware of, my prince, if you are to rule well when you ascend to the throne. Your father has done much to restore our nation to greatness, but the hated Nemedians still stand opposed to him in the east. Their strength has been maintained through a careful web of alliances with the disparate Hyperborean kings, and it has been Hyperborean armies which have managed to repulse our troops, not the base forces of the Nemedians themselves. They could never stand before our marshaled armies alone. Instead, they call barbarians down from the north to fight for them, and the fierceness of the Hyperboreans has managed to repulse our legions many times. Your father has all but given up on the attempt to bring the dragon into the fold, but perhaps you may yet succeed where he has failed. When you ascend to the throne, extend your hand to the northern barbarians, or else find a way to crush them utterly. You will remove a powerful weapon in Nemedia's arsenal. But you must be wary, my prince. The dark strings of Stygian sorcerers lead back to the frozen north. The Hyperboreans have been some of their favored tools as of late, and any attempt to embroil yourself in Hyperborean affairs is sure to bring the attention of the snakes to our south. The affairs of state surrounding Hyperborea are complicated and layered. Perhaps not what you expected for a barbarous nation so far away from our home, eh? You must forgive me, my prince. The hour grows late and I grow weary. I believe I have talked enough for now. Return in the morning, and we shall continue your lessons. Oh, and my prince, toss another log on the fire before you go. There's a good lad.